Hello, YouTube, BookTube, YTPC. This is the Gentleman Scholar. Just finished reading Stephen King's Dark Tower, Book 2, The Drawing of the Three. And like all Stephen King books, I tend to whip through them pretty fast because whether you consider him to be McDonald's storytelling or true literature or an overlap somewhere in between, he's just a really good storyteller. And apparently he's been working on the Dark Tower saga. He was working the Dark Tower saga even before he made it big as a writer. He was writing, I guess he was writing as Richard Bachman at the time, which is where Thinner comes from, The Long Walk, and the now taken out of print Rage, which deals with a school shooting. I still have a copy downstairs of that, and it did pretty much prefigure the whole school shooting. I hate to call it a fad, but fad that basically overrun America since Columbine and is still a regular feature in the news. But I just wanted to say, I remember buying this book back in the 80s when I worked at a comic store, the hardcover version, first edition. And of course, I didn't know anything about the Dark Tower, and all through my life, as I was reading Stephen King, I would hear about the Dark Tower. Some of the characters and concepts would bleed into other books of his, like Hearts in Atlantis. I always just kind of knew it off to the side, and I've been meaning to read it all this time, and I finally found a beat up copy of the first book at Savers, and I just started reading it. When he begins his quest for the Dark Tower across the desert in search of the Black Man. The first book was a little draggy, but a little different from what Stephen King normally writes, because this is basically his fantasy opus. Roland the Gunslinger comes from a world that's kind of a weird, twisted echo of our own, and he's basically a law enforcer, knight type of thing. Comes from a world that's basically made up of leftovers from, well, American culture, really. Echoes of American culture, westerns, train stations, that kind of thing. And yeah, and the world has moved on, whatever that means. So the first book, he basically goes across the desert. He meets a boy named Jake, and in pursuit of the Dark Man, he sacrifices Jake so that he can get knowledge of the Dark Tower. And he basically draws 3 cards at the end of that book, which leads us into this book. And it picks up 7 hours after the first book leaves off. Roland's on a beach, doesn't know exactly where he is, and he gets attacked by these weird talking lobster creatures. They're called lobstrosities because they look like lobsters, but it's not our world, so they only resemble lobsters, and they're about the size of a Doberman Pinscher. And he gets 2 of his fingers taken off, like 4 or 5 pages even starts. But after he defeats that, he walks the beach, northerly direction. His instinct tells him to go north. He sees a door, like right in the middle of the sand, and he opens the door, and guess what? It leads to our world. It leads to the first person. I believe it's the prisoner. I believe it's called, that was drawn in the cards, and the prisoner is basically a drug mule in our world, coming from I believe Montego Bay, Jamaica, and Roland discovers that he can kind of possess this person coming in, and he's in mid-flight on the company that I work for, actually, the airline that I work for. And that's how he gets used to being able to control the body, learn what he needs to learn from his host in this new, and the thing I like about these books is that Roland comes from a different world, a similar world to ours, but not quite exact. So it's kind of fun to see him figure out what an airplane is, sky carriage, and mispronounce certain words like aspirin, that kind of thing. So this first particular segment of Drawing the Three becomes The Sopranos pretty fast, as our buddy Eddie, the guy he's possessing, is held up in customs, and he has to go see his handler for the drugs, and everything goes sideways. There's a huge ass. We're talking John Woo shootout, slow motion shootout, and he takes Eddie with him. So Eddie, as he's in this new world, basically comes off the heroin that he's addicted to because he was a junkie too. So a junkie with an honest face. That's why he was chosen to like run these 2 pounds of heroin through U.S. Customs. Eddie gets straight eventually, like he gets cleaned out, and they come to the second door, Lady of the Shadows, and guess what? This woman has multiple personality. Well, what they used to call multiple personality disorder. Now it's called dissociative identity dissociation, that kind of thing. The terms change every couple of years, but it was called schizophrenia in this book back in the unenlightened 80s. It's a black woman, different time period. I want to say the late 50s because Eddie got picked up in, I guess, then modern day, which is 1986. Detta/Odetta gets picked up from, I want to say, the late 1950s as the evil personality is shoplifting from Macy's in New York, and they bring her through, and all of a sudden Detta comes out. She's like this really savage, abused black lady, and she needs a wheelchair because her ankles were cut off. She was pushed in front of a subway train in New York, and she survived, but her legs were cut off. So Detta is a very, very Odetta is a very, very wise, kindly black woman, and Odetta is, well, let's face it, a psycho, almost feral black woman who hates pretty much everyone, including especially all whites. So basically, our hero's quest, Eddie and the Gunslinger, they have to be careful for Odetta to come out, because if she comes out, she's going to go after them for their lives. And they're in that stage when they hit the third door. The third door leads to a dude called the Pusher. And no, it's not drug related. The Pusher is the person who pushed Odetta onto the tracks in the first place. And his big fetish is he loves killing people in random ways, like dropping bricks on them or pushing them in front of trains, and basically, running from it, hiding out from it before he's ever caught, because he likes the way the pattern changes when one life is shattered and how it affects other lives. He's a very sick individual. Roland goes into him because he needs drugs. He needs antibiotics because he's been infected. His 2 fingers are ripped off by those 2 lobster things, and he's been infected, and he's infected most of the book. So he needs more antibiotics, and he also needs more shells for his gun. And this leads to another shootout in New York City, and the Pusher gets what's coming to him. And that's basically it. So we have Roland has new guns. Oh, by the way, well, I won't spoil anything, but something beneficial happens to Odetta at the end of when the third doorway adventure ends. Something positive, which will help them out a lot. So basically, the book ends where Roland is healing. Eddie is now clean. He's in love with Odetta, now called Susanna, and they're going to be heading towards the tower. But the thing is, the tower is basically Roland's addiction. And Roland will sacrifice anyone to get to that tower because I guess the tower promises knowledge and power and all that. It's never made completely clear. But yeah, this is a really, really fun book. I read swaths of it in the morning because, like I said, Stephen King's a natural storyteller. I remember buying this book when I was younger, but again, it's considered his best work. I mean, it's basically Stephen King writing his I hate to use this comparison, his own version of Lord of the Rings, except that instead of using European touchstones and cultural touchstones, he uses American touchstones. And yeah, I'll read a few more books in between and then move on to The Wastelands as soon as possible, as soon as I find the book in some used bookshop or whatever. And the saga will unfold. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed this. Take care of yourself. This is the Gentleman Scholar signing out.